Welcome to Yeshua Watch. Shalom, shalom. Now, I've entitled this video, People Must Know, because I believe that there are many things that we must know in order to navigate what's coming in the next few years and to understand just how they're related to the final 7 years of civilization as we know it. Today, I'm going to cover 5 things that help to demonstrate that we really are in the very last of the last days. Now, I get all the time people saying, but every generation has thought they were in the last days or that Jesus' coming was imminent. And you would be correct, they have. So then I hear you asking, so Jeff, why is what's going on today any different than what past generations have experienced? And I'm so glad you asked. In a word, convergence. You know, when you go to a fireworks display and the pace and intensity of the fireworks begin to set up, what does that usually signify? Yeah, the big finale is near. A convergence of many fireworks come together for an incredible finish. Well, did you know that Jesus told us to watch for his finale? And he told us what would set the stage, so to speak, to give us some strong hints that it was near, because he does want us to know. But here's one statement Jesus said leading up to his coming. Matthew 24, 6 to 8. And you will hear wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place. But the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. And there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are but the beginning of the birth pains. So Jesus compares the early signs, wars, famines, earthquakes, to birth pains. Like birth pains, they start gradually and then increase in intensity and frequency. And you skeptics look at this and you're probably thinking, there have always been wars and rumors of wars. And yes, there have. But there was never a world war before last century. And yet, according to the Uppsala Conflict Data Program, that's Uppsala University in Sweden, who's been tracking this stuff, in the past 100 years, 2 world wars with at least 4 or 5 nations with itchy fingers ready to start the next one. There's been 20 to 30 multinational wars or significant large scale combat. That's kingdom against kingdom, the way scripture defines it. You have 50 to 100 notable civil wars across various countries, with some still ongoing. 300 smaller scale regional conflicts and insurgencies, and countless hard to qualify, localized ethnic or religious conflicts that have been significant in terms of humanitarian impact. We have between 4 and 500 wars or conflicts in the last 100 years. So it's easy to see that things have significantly intensified in the last 100 years. So we see in Deuteronomy that a single witness shall not suffice against a person for any crime, for any wrong in connection with any offense that he has committed. Only on the evidence of 2 witnesses or of 3 witnesses shall charge be established. Well, there are at least 5 other passages, witnesses, that speak to this principle, requiring 2 or more witnesses to establish whether or not something is true. So we're going to use this principle in our studies to ascertain whether our assumptions or our interpretations are correct. The concept of labor pains is used by the Old Testament prophets to describe times of intense distress that precede the end times deliverance or judgment on the earth. Isaiah 13, 6 to 8 describes the day of the Lord with labor pains as a metaphor for terror and suffering. We see Jeremiah 30 refers to a time of great trouble for Jacob. Jacob is Israel, using labor pains as imagery. The time of great trouble is referring to the final 7 years. Then Micah uses labor pains to describe Israel's suffering before their final deliverance by Yeshua. These all are saying the same thing. That's many witnesses. And in Revelation, it speaks of the escalating seals, trumpet, and bowl judgments intensifying even more. These might be considered a time of hard labor, to put it in the same vernacular. So that's why we believe that it is very near, because of the significant convergence of many prophetic signs. I just gave you one, increasing wars, and we're going to get to 5 more of those right now. Number 1, the rebirth of Israel. Most people start with the least significant sign and work up to the most significant sign. But this is so important. This is the most significant sign, and it is in direct fulfillment of prophecy. None of the rest of the signs have any meaning if this isn't in place first. We'll start in the Old Testament. Jeremiah 16, verses 14, 15 say, "However, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when it will be said, as surely as the Lord lives, who brought the Israelites up out of the land of the north and out of all the countries where he had banished them. For I will restore them to the land I gave their ancestors." So this is a promise of restoration from all over the world where the Jews were scattered. When were they scattered? They were scattered after the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. The fulfillment of this is returning of the Jews from all over the globe to Israel. That happened on May 14th, 1948. In Isaiah 66:8 it says, "Who has heard of such things? Who has seen things like this? Can a country be born in a day, or a nation be brought forth in a moment? Yet no sooner is Zion in labor than she gives birth to her children." Well, on May 14th, 1948, Israel, or Zion as it is called in this passage, declared statehood and became a nation in what? One day. What these passages are talking about is what Jesus also prophesied in Matthew 24. Verse 32, "From the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts out its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see all these things, you know that he," that's Jesus, "is near, at the very gates. Truly I say to you," this is Jesus speaking, "truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place." So this generation will not pass away until what? All these things take place. That leads us to ask, all what things? In Matthew 24, Jesus lists a number of things that will happen before his coming. Go back to my video, Keep Watch, if you want to see the list there. But the most important thing to grasp is this. The fig tree is Israel. The passage is saying when Israel, the fig tree, is replanted in their land and they take root again, this happened in 1948, that generation that sees Israel reborn, and all those other things that Jesus mentions in Matthew 24, that generation will not perish before he comes. Think about that. That generation, those still alive here in January 2025, they're about 76, 77 years old. They are passing. Now, we could get into how long a generation is and all that, but we don't need to go down a rabbit trail because that's not important if you really hear what he's saying. There will be people that were alive to see Israel reborn, and they will not pass away before Jesus returns. That tells us how imminent his coming is. That starts the clock. It really makes it clear that we are in the very last of the last days. There's plenty of evidence today to even more fulfilled prophecy concerning the nation of Israel. Zechariah 12, 2 and 3 says, "Behold, I am about to make Jerusalem a cup of staggering," a burden that is, "to all the surrounding peoples. The siege of Jerusalem will also be against Judah. On that day," that's the final battle it's talking about, "I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the peoples. All who lift it will surely hurt themselves, and all the nations of the earth will gather against it." All the nations of the earth will gather against it. More and more nations are turning against Israel. We have, for the first time in our nation's history, had thousands of people gathering against Israel at pro-Palestinian rallies across the nation. Did you realize that Satan, the counterfeit imitator of God in every way, is merely duplicating what God did with Israel? You see, God brought back Israel from the dead, a resurrection of sorts. Another beautiful fulfillment of prophecy, that is the dry bones coming to life from Ezekiel 37. And that was in 1948. And then Satan brought back the arch enemy of Israel, the Philistines. You probably didn't know that the Palestinians call themselves Philistia, spelled with an F rather than a PH like the Philistines. But again, it is a counterfeit. They are not from the actual lineage of the Philistines, they are Arab in lineage. But throughout history, Satan has assured that the people who have moved into the old Philistine territory, where the Gaza Strip is, they carry on a resemblance of that name. And more importantly, they carry the evil spirit of the Philistines who hated Israel. Okay, the next thing that shows us where we are standing right at the gate of the end times is number 2. We're in a time of great deception. Mark 13:22 and 23 says, "For false Christs and false prophets will rise and perform signs and wonders to lead astray, if possible, the elect. Be on guard. I have told you all things beforehand." Jesus warns of signs and wonders used by deceivers to mislead even the faithful, emphasizing vigilance. And then 2 Thessalonians 2:9 to 12. "The coming of the lawless one is by the activity of Satan with all power and false signs and wonders, with all wicked deception for those who are perishing, because they refuse to love the truth and so be saved. Therefore, God sends them a strong delusion so that we may believe what is false, in order that all may be condemned who did not believe the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness." See, the Antichrist and the false prophet will perform signs that will fool nearly everyone. I believe much of this deception will be due to AI technology, which is maturing as we speak to create unbelievable deep fakes that can really fool most anyone. But part of the power that these two entities will also have is supernatural power. And it's Satan who's underpinning their deceptive actions. And let's read 2 Corinthians chapter 11, where Paul warns the church of Corinth that there are false apostles among them. He then goes on to say in verses 14 and 15, "And no wonder, for even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. So it is no surprise if his servants also disguise themselves as servants of righteousness." Satan's been honing his deceptive tactics since the Garden of Eden, where he deceived Eve, saying, "You will not surely die. Your eyes will be opened and you will be like God." He deceived Adam and Eve using something they desired. That was to be like God. So is it reasonable to think he might do the same with us? Satan always uses the truth stuffed with a lie. So let's look at a verse that exposes who Satan's servants might be in the end that are alive today, and how they might deceive many and may have deceived us even in the recent past. Revelation 18:23 says, "And the light of a lamp will shine in you no more, and the voice of bridegroom and bride will be heard in you no more. For your merchants were the great ones of the earth, and all the nations were deceived by your sorcery." Very interesting verse there. So it says, your merchants were the great ones of the earth. The merchants, business owners, wealthy elites, those who are in cahoots with governments around the globe, they, with their wealth, will be the ones directing things in the last days. That's interesting. Now let's look at the word sorcery. Might tie some things together. That's the Greek word pharmakeia. That's where we get the word pharmacy or pharmaceuticals from, obviously related to pharmaceuticals or drugs. Do you know who's working with our government and directing their actions today? It may include some of these well-known faces you see here. Some of them were right in the middle of those efforts to use pharmaceuticals and to manipulate the world's inhabitants and force them to take a jab. Sound like something that happened in our world recently and still going on, huh? And how did they get people to conform to their demands? By offering us something that we all desire: good health. I do believe Satan's behind a lot of this stuff that we see going on around us. They also used a lot of fear, manipulation, intimidation, deception, and lies. If you dig under the covers, as I have, you will see a lot of money exchange hands among those merchants too. And you know what they say: follow the money. But that's all for another day. What this is saying is that if we fall for these corporate government world leaders' deceptions, We're at risk of our lamp going out and not hearing from the bridegroom, that's Jesus, anymore. What? Why would that be? Well, I think it's because we may also then fall for the coming mark of the beast that is going to be forced upon us similarly. And anyone who takes that mark will not have the opportunity to turn back. We'll cover more on that in the future as well. But the bottom line, though, is with AI combined with the world's global connectivity, at no time in history have we had a better opportunity to be deceived than we have right now. You really can't believe anything you see anymore, can you? Okay, so moving along, the next topic that tells us that we are in the last days is number 3, kind of related to the last one a little bit: global technology proliferation. With cameras everywhere capturing our every move, and phones and cars, GPS tracking built in, it's nearly impossible to go completely off grid if you wanted to, so that you couldn't be tracked or whatever. The Bible prophesied that the whole world will witness at the same time many foretold events during the last half of the tribulation period. So I'm going to pull up a table of just some events that will be seen by the world. And for time's sake, we'll look at just the first one. So in Revelation 11, verses 3 to 10, we read, "And I will appoint my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days," that's 3.5 years, "clothed in sackcloth. They are the 2 olive trees and the 2 lampstands, and they stand before the Lord of the earth. If anyone tries to harm them, fire comes from their mouths and devours their enemies. This is how anyone who wants to harm them must die. They have power to shut up the heavens so that it will not rain during the time they are prophesying. And they have the power to turn the waters into blood, and to strike the earth with every kind of plague as often as they want. Now when they have finished their testimony, the beast that comes up from the abyss will attack them, overpower them, and kill them. Their bodies will lie in the public square of the great city," that's Jerusalem it's talking about, "which is figuratively called Sodom and Egypt, where also their Lord was crucified. For 3.5 days, some from every people, tribe, language, and nation will gaze on their bodies and refuse them burial. The inhabitants of the earth will gloat over them and will celebrate by sending each other gifts, because these 2 prophets had tormented those who live on the earth." Now, looking at this passage, we can plainly see here that some from every people, every tribe, every language, and every nation will see this event. Then it says the world will have a party because they are dead, even exchanging gifts. Now think about it. John, when he was writing this in the 1st century, he was writing about something he knew couldn't happen in his day. When in history has there ever been a time when the entire world could see an event happen at the same time? Not even 20 years ago. Not instantly. Not globally. Now nearly everyone is on a cell phone. There are over 7 billion smartphones in use worldwide today. And as of this month, January 2025, the global population is around 7.6 billion. About 2 billion of those are children under 15, and as we know, many of them have their own smartphones today. And then with the wider spread of internet access globally, we're living in the first time in history that this could be fulfilled. This list shows a number of things that will be seen by the world, including that the entire world will be given a choice to worship the beast and his image and accept his mark. So the next topic that shows us we are at the tail end of the end times timeline is number 4, global moral decline and self-centeredness. Yes, believe it or not, Scripture prophesies this. 2 Timothy 3, verses 1 to 5. "But mark this, there will be terrible times in the last days. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of good, treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power. Have nothing to do with such people. Wow, what a verse. Does this sound like the world you live in today? Our society, not just in America, but globally, has decayed at a rapid pace. The changes in just the last 10 years is mind blowing. Let's look at our second witness to this, Romans chapter 1, 21 to 25. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images, resembling mortal man, and birds, and animals, and creeping things. Therefore, God gave them up in the lusts of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves. Why? Because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie, that's Satan's deception, and worshiped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. This passage highlights how people turn from God to serve and worship created things, including themselves, reflecting an earth centered and self centered idolatry. It's all about me. I can do or be whatever I feel like today, and you need to not only accept me the way I am, but honor me for what I choose to be. Our global society has never been more self centered and lovers of themselves, as this passage calls it, as it is today. And the fifth thing that shows us that we are in the last days is becoming quite hard to miss. We live in a society where, number 5, lawlessness prevails. So let's jump right in with another passage from Romans chapter 1, verse 28 to 29. And since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind to do what ought not to be done. They were filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, and maliciousness. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, foolish, faithless, heartless, ruthless. Though they know God's righteousness decree that those who practice such things deserve to die, they not only do them, but give approval to those who practice them. And then we see in Matthew 24, verse 12, says, and because lawlessness will be increased, there you go, the love of many will grow cold. It was prophesied that lawlessness will increase in the end times. As society gets increasingly lawless, the population will become more and more cold and unloving. I think it's fair to say we're witnesses of this being fulfilled today more than any time in our lifetimes. And Paul explains in 2 Thessalonians that lawlessness is already present in the world, but it will reach its peak in the end times. 2 Thessalonians 2:7. For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains it will do so until he is out of the way. With open lawlessness being prominent and even promoted by our local, state, and federal government leadership, it seems every day we have to ask ourselves, can it get any worse? Unfortunately, prophecy says it will get worse, but we are definitely seeing all of the critical signs we are told to watch for that show the imminency of his return. So in summary, these things were prophesied and have already been either fully or partially fulfilled in our lifetimes. Number 1, the rebirth of Israel. Jesus will return before the generation passes that saw Israel reborn. They are getting up in age. That time is very near. Number 2, the time of great deception is upon us. With global AI and other technologies, we've never had a period of time where we could be deceived globally as we have today. Number 3, global technology proliferation. That's prepared the way for all to see. Never in history has there been technology interconnecting us that would enable the entire world to see something all happen at the same time until now. Number 4, global moral decline of society and self-centeredness. Our global society has never been more morally depraved, self centered, and lovers of themselves as it is today. It's gone so far that you can no longer have your own opinion about a matter. Elites have even redefined words to make it so. Have you noticed that the word tolerance means that you must agree with me or you're wrong? And that leads us to the last one, number 5. Lawlessness is prevalent. Stores have had to put everyday items in locked cabinets so that people won't walk out the door with them. We've seen videos of people walking out of stores with carts full of items and nobody stops them. Shockingly, we can no longer count on our government officials to uphold and enforce our nation's laws. All too often, they're the ones breaking or rewriting laws for their own purposes. Lawlessness at all levels is out of control. And if you notice, I actually kicked this whole thing off with a bonus point: wars will increase. So you've actually got 6. As Jesus said, these are the beginning of the birth pains. We are in birth pains now and have been for quite a while. They are now getting more and more frequent and more intense. Folks, we have to stay alert. And with that in mind, in the near future, I'm going to lay out a timeline of history for you from creation to present day, aligning with so many prophecies or many witnesses, as we discussed, that give us a real good idea that we are indeed in the right season, corroborating where Jesus said, "You will know that summer is near." He expects us to know that the season of his coming is upon us, or he wouldn't have told us to watch for it. We'll also talk about the Antichrist potential candidates, what's the meaning behind 666 and the mark, and a boatload more. So please hit that like and subscribe button so you'll be sure to be notified of future topics. Also, drop a comment with thoughts on this video or ideas for future topics. I'd love to hear your input. Thanks so much for partnering with us and sharing our channel with others so we can reach more people for his kingdom. Check out our 2025 kickoff and keep watch videos if you haven't seen them yet. And until next time, I'll see you here, there, or in the air.